And part 5, I think I probably should have looked it up before, but I didn't. So we're back in the Arctic environment, and my environment has become less unpleasant. I wouldn't exactly call it a pleasant environment, but it's not as hot anymore, or as humid. That might change, like, later in the day. Now, this recording in particular had some hiccups because I got hung up on one item, and it wasn't that I had forgotten about it. It's one of the items that requires a particular execution of skill to get, and I screwed up. And then I had to do a second run where I did forget an item and got items out of sequence, and I've decided I need to stick with the sequence. I can't keep doing these mental gymnastics to try and remember what I've gotten early and what I still need to get. So I went back in, I did it again. So you're looking at a third run of this, which is why it is pretty smooth. Like right there, let the SAX open the door for me and then just jump through. Now, I had a few hiccups with the boss fights, but nothing too damning. And I still think, because I don't actually have a metric for this, it's not a part of the guide or anything, I still think I'm on route for completing this in the right time. I do, however, think that the guide that I'm using is not actually optimized for speed. Like, there are some items that might be better to get later on like a solid continuous run. I don't know, I would have to consider all the back and forth paths, but the issue is that there's still about an hour and 40 minutes of footage to review for the next 2 episodes, and the one that's, like, both things that are going to be cut out of that are going to be enormously difficult, because, like, okay, hang on for a second, like, right here, I have so far been able to just ace the wall jump there, and there I flubbed it, so it's not a perfect run. But basically, the next episode has the return to Ark for the 3rd time, where we fight the Nightmare. And that will include navigating through the hidden area of Aqua, which is riddled with secrets. They're just everywhere. And I've already seen, or I've already edited part of the footage where I'm basically, like, constantly pausing when I was recording to look at the guide and find out where stuff was, because, yeah, it's full of stuff that's just hidden. That's part of the reason why I figured that, like, just a guide wouldn't be enough. I would need a visual accompaniment. The thing is, I've been doing so well in my actual play for these recordings, for the actual uploads, that I will start the guide recording first, let it, like, gain 30 seconds on me or whatever, and then I'll actually end up catching it up while I'm playing. The only thing that slows that down is when I let the ship's computer and take forever while it's doing so. So yeah, we have that Aqua Nightmare, and then of course I have to head through Nock, so that's gonna be another, like, 3-sectioned, thing. And then the final one is the full run, like the return to all the previous sectors to get the items that weren't retrieved before, because there was something we needed. The last video is probably going to be the longest. And it's back to the main deck. Is this supposed to be a mechanical elevator? It looks like some sort of energy elevator, and these ships have artificial gravity, so, you know, those science fiction tropes are in full effect. But it's funny how when the elevator... Give it a second. Note how the disc is behind one of the rings. when it loses power, so that they can explain how is Samus even standing there. I like this variation on the little crawly guys where they actually have armor, but it's implied, at least, that these X versions of the creatures have been augmented. Because, again, it's strongly reminiscent of John Carpenter's The Thing, which, of course, was based on another movie, which was based off of a book, which was never called... Okay, so... The first film, I think, was like The Thing from Outer Space. Or The Thing, The Terror from Beyond Space, something like that. It was not a shape-shifting creature. They wouldn't have even had the technical capability of doing that back then, because I think that was actually a black and white film. But the whole premise was based on a story called Who Goes There? Now, I haven't read the story, so I don't know if the idea that this thing imitates stuff was something introduced in the Carpenter take, or was in the original literative work. But in The Thing, the creature seeks advantage over its prey by taking on forms that are more dangerous than whatever it's... So it basically has a sort of stealth mode, where it's perfectly imitating a creature. But then, when it gets into an actual fight, it, bursts out into tendrils and spikes and all kinds of other chaotic garbage. It'll also do that if you destroy part of its body, and it has to find another means of locomotion. But yeah, because there's like hornodes or whatever in the background of the SRX environment, and they're like green. They're like what you would expect from frogs, but yet the X-infected versions are like red and yellow and a bit spiky and have fangs. They're a lot more aggressive and dangerous looking. So, while the X can imitate a life form perfectly, because the human that it imitated when it tried to overload the boiler didn't look at all strange, for combat purposes, it actually presumably mixes genetic templates from other creatures into the organisms that it's imitating in order to make them more dangerous. Because those little crawly guys are the same as the little, like, I don't know what they're called, because everything has a name if you read the manual. The little crawly guys that used to be, like, slumming it around, Crateria, Upper Brinstar, whatever it was. That opening area in the original Metroid, but now they have an armored shell, and they can actually turtle. I get that the Etecoons and Decora would like, seek out Samus's ship, because it would be the safest place in the station. My question, how did they figure out where it was? There is, of course, the potentially alarming theory that these are not actually the creatures, but X imitating the creatures, performing a perfect imitation. And yeah, I know, Ship's computer claims that it scanned their vital signs and confirmed that they weren't X-hosts, but how does it know? I mean, if the X can imitate someone so accurately... But even the notion that the X-parasite itself, like, its weakness is that it's driven solely by a desire to survive and reproduce without any sort of cognitive dissonance from that. That's also, to some extent, part of the logic of the thing, because... And I do recommend watching the movie, but I can't really make my point without spoiling a detail from it. They had a character who suffered a heart attack. So they take him to the medbay and they try reviving him, and the thing is he explodes into, like, a chest mouth and tentacles and so forth and so on. Now, it might seem odd if he's a copy made by the creature, why would he have a heart attack? And it's like, well, that's the problem. The thing can sometimes imitate its hosts too well. And the idea is that whatever congenital condition he had already, when it imitated him, it didn't remedy that condition. He still had it. So, after this, like, physical trauma and stress, his heart gave out. And the issue is, at this point, his body would have technically died, but of course, the thing's constituent cells are driven to act and survive on their own. So when they torch this guy's body, his head, which is, like, on the far side of the fire, physically uncouples itself, grows spider legs and eye stalks, and tries crawling out of the room. And this gives MacCready, who at this point some of the survivors thought was one of the things, this gives MacCready the idea that every cell of this animal is a creature in and of itself, and has its own instinctive drive to survive. Now, as a whole, it's intelligent enough to suppress aspects of that in order to maintain the illusion. But separated into a smaller, non-sentient mass, it will act purely on instinct. So he gets this idea to sample blood from all of them, and then drive, like, a hot piece of copper into the blood. And his notion, logically, is that human blood is just tissue. And so it can't do anything, it can't react when the hot wire is driven into it. But the blood of this thing will be forced to react in some way. And sure enough, when he gets to the sample of one of the crew members that is one of the things, the blood literally leaps out of the petri dish and then tries flowing away on the floor. Yes, by the way, this enemy's name, because I have read up on it now, is Ghetto, which... okay, sure. If you couldn't tell by what it was doing there before, this gives us the space jump. But again, my thought is that this organism probably didn't have that ability originally, and that somehow the X obtained space jump from something, and then incorporate it into Ghetto, so when it takes so much damage that it loses its limbs, it falls back on that space jump capability. Another instance of this from, like, Guyver, the bio-boosted armor, would be, like, Aptom. Because Aptom's probably one of the cooler Zoonoids, because he can just assimilate the tissue from other Zoonoids. And beyond imitating them perfectly, he can also amalgamate various abilities into a single form. And the thing is we find out that the form that he chooses, like what abilities he decides to manifest more strongly than others, is actually a conscious decision. Because when he has a portion of the brain of one of the Zoolords, like, tricked into absorbing it, he comes under the control of that Zoolord, and the Zoolord doesn't fully understand how to manipulate Aptom's biology at that point, so he turns into Chaos Aptom, which basically is this chaotic amalgam of limbs and wings and tentacles and spikes. So, the Thing, basically. Until later he gains control of Aptom's body and causes him to assume an asymmetrical, but more orderly form. But interestingly, when Aptom regains control, his form changes and becomes more symmetrical, so Aptom chooses the form that he ultimately assumes based on his own sensibility or criteria. So he probably goes for a symmetrical form over an asymmetrical form because he finds that to be better looking. It's more attractive. Man, the SAX has the view distance of an enemy from Metal Gear. This was actually pretty slick. I took a hit which wiped half my health. That's the SAX for you. Yes, we're back in, for me at least, the infamous tropical habitat. Like, seriously, this place is just a maze. You know, those things were annoying in Meridian as well. So we're hunting the source of the roots. Now, you do not want to end up in these stupid bottom plants, because it is just such a pain to get out of them. And of course, the little pollen... I mean, this is... Thematically, this boss is reminiscent of Spore Spawn. It's even got the look of that particular region. The green area. But it's also important to note that the source of these seed things looks a bit like a Chozo statue, and it's established lore-wise as well that the Chozo statues actually have organic components, like they're biomechanoid creatures. Which, again, is sort of a reference to the space jockey from Alien. That's why an X-Parasite imitated one of them earlier this game. So this was probably another imitation of that sort, where it just amalgamated plant life, which is even more alarming, because it means that the X could theoretically imitate plants as well as animals. I mean, it's a shame that there's very little hard science to back this up, because I'd like to know what kind of scientific gymnastics the Chozo had to do in order to make the Metroids immune to the imitation effects of the X and capable of absorbing them. Because the X seem to have very little limit in terms of what they can replicate, or how much. So how do the Metroids avoid, you know, falling victim to this seeming superorganism? Yeah, they put that ledge just high enough that you can't make it if you morph ball jump. You have to actually jump at the wall and do a ledge grab. That's how they hide it from you. There's not even, like, a section of block that is indicating that there's maybe a passage there. So that's one of those secrets that is super hidden. A bit like the items in Super Metroid, where it doesn't even give you an indication on the map that there's an item there, and there's just a block that you have to destroy. There were 3 of those items. I remember the number. I don't remember which ones they were and where were they. But yeah, we're already getting a lot less chitter-chatter from Ship's computer. It might not seem like that with how slowly the damn dialogue scrolls, but yeah, the hand-holding has begun to reduce. A part of that is because we're revisiting locations we've already been, so, like, what really has changed? Not much. I don't know why these things are called rippers. They don't even, like, they don't have little legs fidgeting, no animation. They just kind of lazily float back and forth. You figure an enemy called Ripper would have some intimidating quality to them, but no, they just kind of, I'm going to the right. I've gone as far as I can to the right. I'm now going to the left. Bugs were annoying in Super Metroid, too. I do like the implication here that these bee things actually evolve from... or, not evolve. Let's not make the weird Pokemon distinction. They metamorphosis from the crawly things, because we see both of those in Super Metroid, but we don't see anything that implies a transition from one to the other. Some have suspected that it's not actually a natural thing, and that the X just sort of did that, but if the X can just freeform shapeshift, why would they need a metamorphosis? It makes more sense to consider that that's actually a feature of the organism that it's imitating. Of course, then the logic still stands that if it can just freeform metamorphosis, why would it... Maybe it sampled the larval state and hadn't sampled the mature state, so it had to wait until naturally metamorphosing before it could sample the anatomical model. I mean, body plan form is held in genetics, so technically if it could morph into something based solely on the genome, it wouldn't need that additional information. We got 2 uses out of that Arc Data Room, but now the X is basically like, nope, you're not getting another upgrade. It's not happening for you, Samus. The Nightmare. Nightmare was also featured in one of the Prime games, before it became an X host. My question then is, well, I don't know, because I haven't played Prime to complete. I don't know if Prime was the one that was featured, because this game came out... I'm not sure if it was a simultaneous release, but it was close. It came out at the same time as Prime. And here we're told that a lot of the Arctic habitat isn't actually... Yeah, it actually wrecked this sector. The map has changed completely. Yeah, the Nightmare is one of the harder bosses. When I played this for the guide recording, I almost died. I ended up with like 13 energy points left on my last tank. Hopefully that won't happen when I replay it this time. Speaking of time, I'm running short on it. I had a little bit more I wanted to go into, but I'll save it. It was mostly about why I didn't add more to this video, because it could have been longer, but I don't have time to mention that now, so I'll see you in the next one.